So anyway, so today I wanted to put out an announcement saying, hey, I'm going to be on at 1 o'clock, trying to be a little bit more proactive at that and kind of remember that. And I wanted to use a photo. So I just kind of looked through my photo app on my computer and just picked one that had some image of a journal. And I just sort of posted it kind of randomly. But as I kind of looked at it, I was like, you know what? There's something on there that I maybe could share today, something I haven't shared in a while, and something that I know I've shared in classes, but maybe not necessarily too often on live streams or things like that. So today I thought I'd talk about tracing, because uh, images are a big part of my journaling process, might be a big part of your journaling process, or even your mixed media process. And so I find that, a lot of times we use images like, from photos. So we use magazines, we print things off of the computer. Sometimes we draw. Um, but then some folks are a little bit apprehensive about drawing, and they don't feel quite like, oh, I don't have the skill to do that. But I believe anybody can draw. And I think what happens is people are like, oh, well, I want to draw that face so it looks exactly like that person. And it just takes time and practice to kind of build that up. But I want to talk about tracing, because I think there's like a stigma around it, and a lot of folks kind of feel like, oh no, that's cheating, I can't trace. But at the same time, some folks will, use stencils, and it's designed by other artists, it's images from their artwork, whether it's a face or a clock or whatever, it's something else some other artist has designed, and they'll use it they'll use the stencils in their work. And I think it's kind of like, oh well, tracing stencils is one thing, but tracing actual images, especially images that aren't yours, I think that's where a lot of times, especially thinking back to like school, and where teachers were always encouraging you or forcing you to draw from a photo or from real life, and may have kind of poo-pooed that notion of tracing. But first of all, if you're using your own images, it's not cheating. It's your image. You can do anything you want with it. Second of all, even if it's not your image, you're changing it. So you're using it in a way, you're not trying to pass it off as like, oh, look, I created this, but it's like, yeah, it's obvious that it's a tracing. So anyway, that's what I want to kind of focus on excuse me, today. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this over, and then that way we can kind of see. So if you've got any questions, or if you want to say hi in the comments, awesome, awesome, awesome. So let me switch this over. Okay, so I've got some images that I might use. I've got my tracing paper. I just use inexpensive tracing paper. Strathmore has a good one. There's lots of sources for tracing paper. Some people will use parchment paper, all kinds of different things. But what I really want to kind of show you, I've got my journal open, and sometimes, you have like an image, whether it's a big image or, a relatively small image, and you want to use it, but then it's sort of like, this is a big image. And so if I put this somewhere, it covers up, so I can't really use it here because it covers that up. And even if I was like, oh, I want to use it here, but again, it just covers up so much. So typically if something is this big, it's not see-through. Uh, it's printed on printer paper. This is a laser print. You can see how kind of it's shiny. So if I wanted to use it, it would really cover up. So I would have to kind of find a space, where maybe there's not so much. Maybe I'm trying to find a space where there's some emptiness. Like even this kind of covers up, but yet, that's a good space. So it really covers stuff up. And that's fine. And, we can always turn to a clean paper, and then that way we're not covering anything up, and then we can kind of add and build on top of this. But what if I wanted to use this picture, this image, and then be able to layer it on top of something else? When we're working with a smaller picture, so here's the same picture, but just much smaller, it's like this fits in some of these other places really well because it's small, and if it covers up a little bit, that's not a big deal. So, but the bigger it is, the more imposing it is. So anyway, let me go ahead. I think I want to use not going to use the brain, but this is an image I've used a lot. I collage it, I've traced it, I use image transfers. I don't know, just kind of like the brain image. Um, so I could just, use one of these and trace it, but I think I want to do the big picture of myself. So let me get these others away. So if you have a favorite photo and you want to use it, or something from a magazine, and you just kind of want to change up the sort of the context of it. It's like I said, this is just a big image and it really covers stuff up. Tracing paper is translucent. So if I trace onto the tracing paper, then it's easy to then take the tracing paper and stick it in and it'll show things through it. So I leave the tracing paper in the tablet. If you tear it out or if you have individual pieces, you can always tape your picture to the back. But one of the reasons I like having the doing it with a big image is that I can slide it in and it shouldn't move. So you can use any material really to trace. You can use pencil, pen. I like to use something like a little unusual. Not as far as the materials. I'm going to use a pen, but I'm going to use a different color. So this is sort of, what is this called? Magenta. So it's kind of like it's not a real bright magenta. This is the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pens that I've used before. And I actually just ordered some new ones. This is a super fine point. So it's going to give me really thin lines, but you could use a thick pen, marker, pencil, really almost anything on the tracing paper. And so I like to do this just because then it adds a different layer. It's not just always black. I mean, I use a lot of black ink to draw things and to write things. So it's always kind of interesting to have an image, a drawing, a tracing in a different color. So anyway, yeah, like I said, that's kind of, I like using it that way just to kind of mix it up. So it's not just always black or always pencil. I could use colored pencil. I could use marker. You could paint. The tracing paper is really thin, so it really buckles easily. So you could see that pretty well through there. Unfortunately, I can't see all the details. I can't really see. I know the back of the neck is over here, but I really can't see that. But that's really kind of cool. It sort of shows the highlights really, really well. And so what I'm going to do is I want to try to usually what I try to do is just outline as much as I can. And especially the light areas. So if I kind of can see a line like, here around the ear, I can really see these very distinct lines. And one of the things is that really high contrast images work better. So if you're printing something out, you can adjust the contrast. So in here, I know there's like a lot of shading, but the tracing paper really kind of creates this darker shadow, which is kind of interesting. And so I'm just going to try to outline it. And so it really eliminates a lot of the detail. And if that really bothers you and you want the detail, you can use the tracing paper in conjunction with like a light box or even just using your window. And so if you have it, now of course I'd have to remove the tracing paper from the tablet. That is one thing about that. I would have to remove it. But that's not really a big deal. Like even up in here, like with the glasses, I'm really losing a lot of the detail, like where my eyebrows come in, it just creates more contrast. So I'm really just trying to trace around the really dark shapes. It's okay if I don't worry so much about like the lighter gray shapes. Now with the beard, there's all kinds of like things going on. So I'm not going to worry so much about trying to draw in all the hairs and such on the beard, but I just am going to try to get the shape. I see Bonnie mentions about the contrast, and I kind of lost my train of thought, so I don't know how much I said about using that photo app. But yeah, if you have a photo app and you can adjust the contrast, that really helps out a lot. See over here, this eye is kind of, there's a lot of reflection and stuff, so it's really kind of odd. I really can't see, but I'm just going to try to make it up. So again, I'm trying to trace the darker shapes the best that I can. There's a little bit of gray here that catches some of the light. Okay, so I have, if I just lift this up, I have this kind of, maybe it's hard to see, there we go. It's kind of, I have this outline, and it's not very detailed, but I do want to put in some of the black. And so what I typically do is I typically spend a little bit more time with the shadows around the face. And then as I work out my shading, it gets really kind of more haphazard. And so that way it's a little bit darker. So if I just take the pen and start to work in between and just kind of color in those shapes. And I am trying to, like I said, trying to be very much, no, not be very neat, but trying to be pretty neat and try to fill it in pretty solid, but not totally solid. It still looks kind of scribbled. And I'm kind of just using these very small kind of scribbly motions. And like I said, there's just all kind of like weird highlights and things over here. Okay. So anyway, so I'm just kind of scribbling that in, filling that in, maybe a little bit here. So if I wanted to kind of see that line where the glasses are, I could just leave a little thin line, even though there's not one in there really. Okay. And then also the eye kind of disappears. So sometimes just having a little reflection, even though the reflection may or may not be there, just it might disappear because of the tracing paper. Like I said, the tracing paper really just sort of hides the detail. So like I said, if you really are kind of like struggling with it and you really like, oh no, it's got to be more realistic, then feel free to, like I said, use a light box or put it up against a window. All right. So like I said, around the eyes especially, but like even the nose. Like I know that there's a nostril in there somewhere, but just kind of thinking about like, oh, it's in shadow. And so it's okay if I don't see the nostril. I have that highlight there. And sometimes when you're sort of coloring it in, you're like, that's never going to really look like the picture, but you'd be kind of surprised. So again, trying to be kind of tight with the coloring and the shading, even though it's kind of more scribbly. But here in the beard, I'm going to start to kind of fill in some of the shadow, some of the darker parts. And some of it's going to be kind of tight, but then where there's more white, more gray showing, then it's going to be a little bit more loose. So in the beard here, I can really get some good shading, but I'm just trying to kind of follow along the way the hair grows. And so then that way my marks kind of mimic the whiskers in my beard. And I have this kind of darker triangle in the middle of my beard, and then it gets a little bit lighter. So my marks get a little bit further apart. And I'm not trying to fill in every little dot of black. I'm just trying to be pretty quick about it. And in here, it gets a little bit tighter, a little bit darker. Okay, move back up here. So again, around the face, I'm just trying to be a little bit more deliberate, not as scribbly. So I'm kind of going back and forth in a diagonal way, and then I kind of come back and scribble on top just to make it a little bit darker. So I'm still trying to be pretty tight with my shading, except for like here in the hair, and down here in the beard. Okay, so I've got a large chunk of the shading done around the eyes. Now the background's pretty dark. Down here is dark. So really the background's kind of black. Now that's a lot to fill in. So I'm not going to fill in the entire piece. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off near the light parts, and I'm trying to be tight, and I'm kind of going up and down and kind of scribbling and just trying to make these kind of tight scribbling shading marks. So this is just something I don't want to be like super neat and all with this. I just think it's a little bit more interesting. But if you are, I mean, you could do some like really formal hatching and cross hatching if you know how to do that. But I just kind of like scribbling. Just gives it a nice texture. But what happens is I'm going to work real tight near the face. So I want the background there by the face to feel pretty dark and pretty solid, but it's not going to be totally solid. I'm going to have some areas of space there, you know. So anyway, and then as I work out, so I'm not going to try to fill this whole thing in, but now I'm going to go ahead and get real loose with it and just really let my hand dance. So my elbow's up off the table and that hand is just kind of dancing around, and I'm getting a lot of space. And so what's happening is value wise, it's going from dark to light. And it might not be easy to see that now, but once I'm done and remove the picture, you'll see how that is. So now I'm back up next to the face. I want to be a little bit tighter. If it was really important to you and you wanted to have the shoulders in there and the neck, things like that, like I said, you could use that light box, use a window. So like most things, I have a tendency to kind of jump around. And I'm not worried about like this line here that I drew for the forehead is very kind of bumpy and rough. It's not very smooth. But you know, this whole drawing, this whole tracing isn't. So this is a great way to sort of change an image, really make it yours. Okay, so around the hair here, I want to go a little bit neater. If that disappears kind of when I'm done, that's totally fine. So I kind of have my beard here, but I can kind of be rough, and I'm not making it real dark, but I am going to make it a little bit darker down here because the bottom of my beard gets lighter and whiter. And I really want that to kind of stand out, to kind of have an edge. Of course, if I had a bigger pen, this would kind of fill up a little bit quicker. Okay. All right, so I'm around the ear. It's going to be a little bit neater around it. That's going to make it stand out. So wherever I have kind of real light areas, I want to shade very carefully around it, because then it'll be easier to read. It'll stand out. I'll have a dark value against a light value. So this takes time. If I didn't want to do this, if I just wanted to do a line drawing, I could. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is that with a line drawing, it doesn't show up as well because it's a real thin line. And then remember, this is the idea, is that this is going to go on top of other things. So Lita is asking or saying that she needs some help with the face with contrast. If you're looking at a photo and you're working on it in the photo app, it really helps to start with the lighting. So when you take a photo, so when I did my photo here, I actually had my studio lights on and turned off the overhead light. That way I had a really strong light. So sometimes you might go, oh, I really want to use this photo. But if you don't have a real strong light source, no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to get high contrast with it, even in a photo app, even if you have Photoshop. So yeah, so that's kind of a tip. Like, start with a photo that has some really good contrast to begin with, and then bump it up in your photo app or Photoshop or whatever it is that you're using. So somebody asked, is this pencil? No, this is a Faber-Castell Pitt artist pen, and the color is magenta. So it's a very dark kind of magenta. Okay, so you can really see how the contrast is working, how it's darker here, makes the light stand out. You also see that because of the picture underneath it. But I think that might be pretty good. So if I pick this up and take out the image, I just think that's really cool. You know, it's like I could see the beard. If I wanted to, I could go in. Maybe I wanted to darken this up a little bit. Maybe I wanted to darken up around the face. But I'm going to use this. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. All right, let me put this somewhere. Okay, so anyway, I've got this kind of dark magenta pen, which works really well with certain colors that I use a lot. You know, so like even right here, I mean, check that out. Like, just how I laid that down, and I like how this really shows through. I like how the numbers show through, and you can kind of tell how this is darker and easier to see. This is a little kind of foggy, because the tracing paper is translucent. It's not totally transparent. However, when I glue it in, it becomes almost totally transparent. So this kind of fuzziness disappears a little bit. There'll still be a little bit left. But before I do that, I have some sort of unused space. So instead of trying to like glue that all in and try to use up, you know, a lot of glue, I'm gonna go ahead and just cut this. And like I said, that sometimes like this tracing paper, when you glue it in, it almost disappears. And sometimes it's really hard to tell where the tracing paper starts and ends. So I'm not worried about it like being like perfectly straight, but just to kind of cut it down a little bit, make it a little bit easier to handle. Actually, that's going to help out a lot whenever I put glue on it because of the scrap paper I have. If I wanted to, I could use these scraps. I could draw, write stuff on it, glue it in, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw that away. Okay, so yeah, I might glue that here. That's kind of interesting. The only thing that I don't like is that, and this is a compositional thing, is that the face is facing that way. Okay, so typically when we have a face in our image, and if it's facing a certain way, we expect to have more space in front of it than behind it. And usually I think about my pages as full spreads. So it compositionally, this all of a sudden, you know, because my eyes are going this way, so I want to look here. And I totally kind of don't look here. I'll look at the face, but then I'll look over here to see what the face is looking at. And so then that would really, like, you know, just compositionally, if I wanted to think about that. I mean, I might just say, hey, I really like that, I'll glue that in. But if you're kind of thinking about it compositionally, that might be something to really think about. And if you're using this in like a more finished work of art. So I'm just kind of flipping through. That's the other thing is, you know, yeah, I like that, but let me go ahead and look at it in other places. You know, unfortunately, this is a tape transfer. It's really shiny. And if I glued on, it wouldn't stick to it. You know, but you can kind of see how stuff shows through it. That's kind of cool, but I don't think there's enough going on. I want some things to show through. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, is to have something show through. You know, so that's, I mean, you can really see how that pink would show through, but then it really covers up the elephant that I don't think I want to cover up. Oh, that could be interesting. Oh, that could be really interesting. So thinking about it compositionally now, like this is kind of my focal point. And then if I had that here, like I have to be careful because that's real dark. So, you know, maybe I position it. And then, but then I have all this space over here to do something. And then that kind of helps balance it out. I kind of like that. I like that a lot, actually. I like that better than the other one. And then I love maps. So the fact that this image is about the same size as the map, that's really cool. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and glue that here. That magenta, I have some kind of reds and magenta kind of colors in here already. So it really kind of goes well with what I have there, and it kind of fits in with the colors that I have. So I'm gonna find my glue paper. Let me get that out first. So you might remember if you tuned in before, I use this old kind of sketchbook, lots of glue. Here's one thing with tracing paper though. Tracing paper is very thin. When it gets wet, it wants to curl very badly. And so I'm going to tell you right now, I'll probably struggle. This is so big that I'm probably going to struggle getting glue on it and then getting it glued in. So I'm going to probably get my fingers covered with glue. Uhu glue stick, that's what I use. Now this is dark blue. Some people might be like, oh, but then you'll be able to see the dark blue. Yeah, until it dries. This stuff dries totally clear. And this is how I know, because I've used it with tracing paper and tape transfers. Okay, so yeah, what I'm going to try to do is try to really spread my hand out and try to hold that down the best that I can. I don't know, maybe painter's tape. I don't know. I just don't know if there's a good way of keeping the tracing paper from curling, because even though the glue stick is kind of low moisture, there's still moisture in it. And you can see it's already curling at the corners. If it only curls at the corners, then that might not be so bad. Something this big though, sometimes it's really hard to get glue to cover all of it very evenly, and it dries pretty quick. You can see how some of that dark blue glue is already turning clear, which doesn't mean it's totally dry, it just means that it's drying. But, you know, the problem is that now at the top, the glue's drier. All right, so I think I'm gonna try to get this stuck down. So here's where I have to be careful. I'm gonna kind of grab the corners. Yeah, so this is kind of messy. Some people are like, well, why would you even do this? But then the results are really, really interesting. Okay. Sometimes the hardest thing is getting it positioned because this paper is so thin. Okay. And it wants to wrinkle. So really kind of pull it out. If it wrinkles, that's all right. And if some of the edges come up, that's okay. I can come back and get those glued down. So you could see where some of that glue is kind of thick. So I'm just going to take my fingernail and try to kind of smooth out those big globs of glue. And I've got some spots like this corner's kind of coming up a little bit. This edge right here is coming up a little bit. So if I have edges that are coming up, I try to pull them up and get some glue on them before it dries too much. Okay. All right, so actually that's looking pretty good. And I don't know if you can really tell how it looks a little bit more see-through now. It was still a little cloudy. I mean, it's hard to tell. Like now I did line up the tracing paper kind of with the edge of the map. So it's really hard to see the edge of the tracing paper. But like right here's the edge of the tracing paper. Right here is the edge of the tracing paper. And it's a little bit harder to see because that glue really kind of makes the tracing paper stick to whatever's underneath. So, but anyway, yeah, so there's that. And when I move that. So it's just a great way to use an image, but to create layers with it. Once this dries, I can draw on it. I can glue other stuff on it. I can paint over top of tracing paper. Tracing paper tends to be a little bit glossy, but watercolor paint sticks, acrylic paint sticks. So anyway, I think that Shelly's asking about Mod Podge. Mod Podge might work, but since I use a lot of watercolor, I don't want to use Mod Podge since I don't know if it's acrylic based, but it's kind of dries like with a plastic kind of feel and you can't paint watercolor over it. If you're doing acrylic, yeah. The only problem though that I find is that sometimes like whether you're using Mod Podge or acrylic gel medium is that, you know, you paint it down and then it dries before you can get the tracing paper. So what I would do is if I was going to use Mod Podge or matte medium or gel medium or whatever, I would paint the surface. I'd paint my page first and then stick it down. I would not try to paint it on back of the tracing paper because it will really wrinkle and curl and be very hard to handle. So if you put it down on the paper, and then you could just be kind of more, you could do it really quickly with a big brush and not have to worry about wrinkled paper. But as soon as you put the tracing paper in it, it wants to wrinkle and curl. So you do end up with more wrinkles when you do it that way. This way, there's some wrinkles, but because the tracing paper was wet with the glue, then I could really smooth the wrinkles out because it had already kind of stretched because of that water. So, but yeah, I mean, tracing paper, you can use that with acrylic medium or Mod Podge. But because I do in my journals, I use mostly the water soluble materials. I don't use acrylics that much unless it's a final layer. So anyway, so that's just a different way to use images. And remember, tracing is it's not cheating. Okay. So yeah, I don't know where some of us have gotten that idea. Like I said, I think maybe like teachers and adults have maybe told us that, especially I remember when I was in middle school and had art class, like, oh no, you can't trace. But this is a great way, especially if you're using your own images. But like I said, magazine images, images from the internet. I know sometimes people are kind of weary about like, oh, I don't want to use images from the internet because they belong to other people. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but there is a law. It's called the Fair Use Law, and it allows you to use other people's images as long as they take it on a case-by-case basis. But as an art teacher, we always said, like, if you're kind of changing it 80%, you know, so doing what I did, like, number one, I changed it because it's not black and white. Even if that wasn't my own image, it's not black and white. I used pen, so it's a different medium. I changed up the style of it, and then by layering it in, all of a sudden it becomes something different of mine. So anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got some ideas about that. Like I said, if you're going to do this, high contrast images, and the best way if you're going to do photos is to start with a high contrast image. So if you're doing it yourself, set up studio light so that you have like a strong light, and you don't have multiple light sources. So the easiest thing is, if you are in your photo app and you make it black and white, if it's very gray, if everything's kind of gray, that's low contrast, and really you're not going to be able to get a lot of contrast even if you bump up the contrast a lot. So start with a high contrast photo, think about lighting, that helps a lot. Maybe you're outside in the sun, that's really great for high contrast. And then bump up that contrast. So go in your photo app. Most photo apps have some kind of way to adjust the contrast, or you can adjust the lightness and darkness or the brightness, and then you can print it out. So anyway, so Bonnie asked about the 80%. That was just a rule of thumb that art teachers, at least in the group of art teachers I hung out with and was friends with, used. And then that way, that idea is like, I'm changing it so that it's not the original. I'm not trying to pass off an original work of art as my own. Or somebody else's original art as my own. So I'm changing it. I'm using it. So that 80% is really, like I said, a rule of thumb. Courts take it on a case-by-case basis. So I know some people, I got into some arguments online before in different Facebook groups with people about, like, oh, well, if you use my artwork, then that's illegal. And it's like, well, no, if I change it, if I do this, I do that, it's fine. And they were like, oh no, and I'm like, okay, whatever, don't worry, I'm not going to use your artwork anyway. So yeah, if you're using your own photos, not a big deal. Same thing with like I said, with photos you find online or things that you find in magazines, tracing, you're changing it. You're not using the magazine. But even collaging, even if you're cutting out a picture, you're changing the context of it, that you're using that piece of collage in your work, and you're transforming it into a work of art, into something totally different. So anyway, yeah, so I really appreciate you joining me today. And if you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, pop them into the comments. And if you ever want to, if you missed part of this, or if you want to go back and watch it again, remember, you'll be able to find it here on my Facebook page. It automatically saves, so you can go back and watch it anytime. And I also pop it into my YouTube channel, and I have a whole bunch of other stuff on there as well. So anyway, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next week. Oh, I almost forgot. There was one more thing. Some of you may have already logged off. But anyway, I'm thinking about doing almost, or should I say, weekday live streaming in May. I have a little journal, and I've been itching to do something. It's been sitting in my studio for over a year. I haven't used it. I want to use it. And so I'm thinking about doing that daily, or at least on the weekdays in May. So I'll put out more information about that by the end of the week, because May starts this weekend. So anyway, thank you so much, and I appreciate you being here, and as always, happy creating. So Lita, before I jump out, I just saw your question about the crack drawings. So the ones that I did in my journal are here on Facebook. You can just click on videos on my artist page. So if you're seeing this kind of in your own news feed, then you can click on where it says Eric Scott Artist Studio. Click on that, go to there, and then there's a video tab. Click on that, and all of the old live streams are there, and you can find them all. So anyway, and all the any videos, even the time lapse that I share every Friday. So anyway, thank you so much, and catch me next week.